When you're just starting your adoption journey, understanding the state law can be incredibly confusing. Much less understanding all 50 state laws can feel really overwhelming. So, we're starting a new series here on the YouTube and podcast channel where we're going to be meeting with adoption attorneys in different states so that you can get an overview of the state law and potentially a resource for you to contact should you need to find an adoption attorney in that state. In this episode, we are speaking with Lucerce Bundy, and she is an adoption attorney in the state of Nebraska. She will be giving us an overview of the adoption law in the state of Nebraska. Before we dive right in, let me take just a minute to introduce myself. My name is Amanda, and I'm an adoptive mom on a mission to simplify the adoption process for hopeful adoptive families. I do this through courses as well as helping you create and share your adoption profile. If you haven't already done so, I really would appreciate it if you would take a moment to subscribe to the YouTube channel. All you have to do is click the button that says subscribe and ring the little bell icon so that you'll be notified each and every time I release a new video. Today, I am so honored to bring back one of my friends and mentors in the adoption space, Lucerce Bundy. Lucerce actually has a YouTube channel of her own. If you haven't already checked that out, I really do suggest that you do that. She was actually my inspiration for starting this YouTube channel, but she is a wealth of knowledge, not only on the adoption process in general, but as well as being an adoption attorney in the state of Nebraska, and therefore having a deep understanding of the law in Nebraska. Join me in welcoming Lucerce to the show. Lucerce, thank you so much for being willing to join us today.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. I'm so happy to be here. And yeah, honored that you asked me to be here and answer some questions.
Well, you're always my go-to adoption attorney. Anytime I have any question whatsoever, you're the first person I text or DM or email. And so I'm really honored that today we could have you back and talk about kind of adoption law in Nebraska, since that is where you are licensed to practice law, but also we'll share a little bit more about what you do to help hopeful adoptive families as well. So as we dive in, I thought maybe just because there's always someone out there that maybe is not familiar with you, I thought I'd give you the opportunity just to spend a minute or two talking about you and your background.
Yeah. So like you said, my name is Lucerce Bundy. So I am a mama of 3 young boys. They're 11, 8, and 6, married to my husband for 15 years. And I started down the road of doing adoption law because, God's just placed a heart in me for kids in need, specifically at-risk youth. And so I worked in juvenile court for a few years and really kind of got to see how the foster care system works. And since I've just been, working at my adoption law office and just helping folks finalize their adoptions.
That is amazing. And your heart is enormous when it comes to adoption in general as well, but especially when it comes to adoption. I have seen you love on hopeful adoptive families inside of your programs just to the nth degree, and they always feel super welcome and supported into the adoption journey after working with you. So thank you on behalf of our community for all that you do for hopeful adoptive families as well.
Oh, thanks, Amanda.
So today we want to learn all the things, or at least all the things we can, in a short period of time as it relates to adoption law in Nebraska. And if you wouldn't mind, I would certainly love if you would just start with a general overview, and then we'll talk about kind of the intricacies of self-matching and advertising and all of that. But I think just to get us all on the same page, just a general overview of how it works in Nebraska would be incredibly helpful.
Yeah, and we're talking specifically newborn adoption, right?
Yes, ma'am. That's a great clarification. Thank you.
Yeah, because there's a lot of different types of adoptions. So in Nebraska, actually, 2022 was a big year because the adoption law statutes were changed in June of this year. Oh, wow. And so there are a lot of good changes that have happened with the law. But generally, newborn adoptions are private adoptions. And so you just basically need to follow the law when you're doing it. There's paperwork that needs to be filled out and notices need to be sent to possible biological fathers. And it has to be done a certain way based on statute. And so once everything is done legally like it's supposed to, then usually newborn adoption can go through the courts just fine. Same thing with out-of-state adoption. So if you live in Nebraska, but you're adopting out of state, ICPC then applies. And then again, it's following the law and making sure all the paperwork and everything required by law is, signed, filled out, sent out, whatever it is that you need to do so that the adoption can be legalized in court.
Awesome. So you touched on a couple of things there that I want to go back and unpack for the audience.
Sure.
So one, as it relates to the process, can you talk a little bit more about like the revocation period in particular? Because that was one little nuance that I picked up on.
Yeah. So if an expectant mom has chosen an adoptive family to place her baby with, she cannot sign her rights away to that baby until at least 48 hours after she gives birth. So that's the Nebraska period of revocation. Well, no, it's not a revocation. It's just that's how long we have to wait before you can even approach her with the paperwork for her to sign. You have to wait at least 48 hours.
Okay.
The revocation period is a different thing. So once she signs the paperwork and she relinquishes her rights, in Nebraska, there's no waiting time where she can go back and change her mind. So there's no revocation period in Nebraska.
Okay. So she cannot sign prior to birth. I know in some states that is possible. And just because the type A person in me wants to ask all the detailed questions as well, the 48 hours, that is calendar, like consecutive hours. So if it happens on a Friday afternoon, it's still 48 hours from then is when she could sign.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. You also talked a little bit about consents from a birth father's perspective. Can you touch on how that possibility or how that works if he is present or not present during those 48 hours as well?
Yeah, so biological fathers have to be notified. So any possible biological father has to be notified of the adoption, and there's the statutes kind of tell you how to do that, how to send them notice so that they get the proper legal notice that there's an adoption that's going to be happening. And so under the law, they have a certain number of days that they have that they can reply back. They can, basically say that they're okay with the adoption, or they can say they want to fight the adoption. So they have a certain number of days for them to respond to the notice that you send them. One of the things that's really important to highlight here is that sometimes moms are not sure who the bio dad is. Yeah. And it's really important for them to identify all the possible biological fathers and for all the possible ones to be given notice. Because, if one of them comes up later and finds out that she had a baby and he thinks maybe he could have been the father, that could potentially annul the entire adoption, especially if he can prove that he was the father. Yeah. So it's very, very important that mom identifies all possible biological fathers in Nebraska and that they are all notified of the adoption so that they have the opportunity to answer and kind of decide what they want to do.
And can they notify him prior to the 48-hour window after birth, or does that have to wait until after the 48-hour window?
Basically, the way that I do it here is I just notify them whenever mom gives me their information. Okay. So in Nebraska, they can, from the time they receive notice, they have, so many days to answer back. Or if we don't know about the dad until mom gave birth, I had a situation like that when mom gave birth and didn't decide to place for adoption. And so we could only send notice after baby was born. You still send notice out and he still gets the same number of days to reply back and kind of let you know what he wants to do. So yeah, it doesn't really matter if you send the notice before birth or after birth, as long as he receives notice. That's the most important part.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that is definitely not something you want to be caught in the middle of. I've had a client who came to me when they were, kind of in that spot, if you will, where they didn't know and no one had applied note or given notice, and they thought the adoption was final, and now they found themselves in a legal battle. And it was very unfortunate. So it's really important that hopeful adoptive families engage with someone in that state that has passed the bar, that is a licensed adoption attorney, and really follow the advice to the T, because each state statutes, to your point, do vary and they do update from time to time. So it's really important.
Yeah. I had a very crazy situation. I think it was about 2 years ago, and I can't remember the state now off the top of my head. But what happened was my clients went down to the state to pick up a baby. They call me on the way back to Nebraska because they're thinking, oh, well, since we're in Nebraska, we should probably get an attorney to help us finalize this adoption. So they call me on their way back to Nebraska and they say, hey, we have this baby. We're going to pick up the baby from, I don't know, let's say Wyoming. We will bring the baby back and we need an attorney to help us finalize. So I start asking them the question, hey, did you have a home study? Who represented the mom? All that kind of stuff. And they said, oh, the attorney for the mom is the same one who represented us. And I said, how? Like what? And they're like, yeah, he said that would be fine. And he typed up all the paperwork and mom signed something. And so anyway, it ended up being that the attorney, I don't think he's ever done an adoption before. And basically, it looked like my clients could have kidnapped the baby because mom didn't have counseling. She didn't have an attorney representing her that was separate from my clients. They didn't have a home study done. She didn't have literally no paperwork. Nothing was done for this baby to be able to cross the state line safely. The ICPC office wasn't notified. And so it ended up taking us about 1.5 years to complete the adoption because we had to do an emergency guardianship. We had to prove to the court that my clients did not kidnap this baby. Mom had to sign off. And so instead of mom just relinquishing, it became this whole thing where she now had to go through the guardianship process and agree to the guardianship and then say, yep, I'm okay. And then we had to redo the whole thing all over again. Yeah. And so one of the things that when I talk to adoptive parents, is picking the right attorney, because most people I find think that a family lawyer can just do their adoption. So most people just think, I'm just going to call a family attorney because surely they do adoptions. Some do, but adoption, it's kind of like immigration law or criminal law. There are some attorneys that specialize in a specific type of law. So yeah, a family lawyer may have done a couple adoptions over the years, but you really want an attorney who's done enough adoptions to be able to help you through the process. Because adoptions can get very complicated and it's very statute specific. And so you don't want to go pick up a baby at the hospital, come back to your city and find out that nothing you did was right in the first place, because that puts you in a very vulnerable situation. That means that mom could have changed her mind then and been like, actually, I don't want to do this adoption anymore. I want baby back. And then they would have been stuck. And there was nothing anybody could have done to stop mom from picking up the baby. And so it's really, really important to pick an attorney who actually is very, very experienced with adoptions.
Yeah. Yeah. And you touched on really important points there, that mom needs to have her own attorney and you need to have your own attorney. And one, that's just ethical, right? It is impossible for someone to just split themselves down the middle and advise one client one way and one client the other way. That's just, common sense. Quite honestly, you've got to stay focused on that. Second, there are different types of attorneys, but even with adoption law, there are different types of attorneys within adoption law as well. There are adoption attorneys that specifically are focused on Native American adoptions, as well as then adoption attorneys that are licensed only in certain states, right? And so it is really important that where a baby is born, that, mom has an attorney in that state, and where you live and you're going to be finalizing your adoption, you have an attorney in that state. And that those two attorneys talk to each other so that they both understand the laws in each other's states, so that you are staying on the up and up. Because to your point, you do not want to be caught in a situation where you're vulnerable because emotions are on the line. And quite honestly, this child is then in kind of a limbo situation. And that's not what any of us want for this child at all.
Right. So 1.5 years later, we finally did it. And thank God mom didn't change her mind. And there was another situation where that exact scenario happened, but in a different state. But what happened then is, after the adoptive parents came to Nebraska, mom started talking about this other possible biological father that she had not disclosed before. And so what we found ourselves in was, now this person calls and says, I want this baby. And so I'm just telling you, I've had so many cases like that here where it became very complicated very quickly, just because and it was as simple as they didn't have an experienced adoption attorney from the get-go. That was the mistake they made from the beginning, which ended up being a 1.5 year long process that could have ended up horribly. At one point, the clients were so sad because they were like, they were scared, and I have no answers for you, because if this is the bio dad and mom lied to the attorney and he takes the paternity test and he's the dad and he's fit, he can come take his baby. That's for you guys, because you guys didn't hire an experienced adoption attorney. And so Don't want to belabor the point, but it is really important that you
It
have an
is so
adoption
important.
attorney. Yeah.
Yeah. And it is even beyond hiring an adoption attorney. It's really important that you follow the advice of the adoption attorney
Yes.
once you hire them,
Yes.
especially when we're talking about topics like self-matching your adoption.
Yeah.
And so when you're self-matching your adoption, it's, to me, your attorney has got to be your best friend because you really want to follow the exact law as it relates to, are you allowed to advertise? How are you allowed to support, the expectant family throughout the process? Do you mind to touch a little bit on that and how it works in the state of Nebraska?
Yeah. So self-matching, I mean, all across the US is basically the same thing. I mean, you're just finding an expectant mother without the help of a third party, basically,
Right.
is what you're doing. And you can do that anywhere in the United States. Where a lot of people start getting in trouble with that is once they do match with someone, that's when they start kind of like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? Mom wants to place the baby with us. What do we do? So what I usually tell folks is it's probably better for you to hire an attorney at the beginning of your self-matching journey. You're probably going to have to pay them more if they're going to just stick with you until you actually finalize. But it's better to just have somebody there that's your attorney that when you do get the self-matching going on, they can help you with the process after that instead of matching and then not knowing what to do from then on. Because there are some states, some people that live in small cities and counties where there's no adoption attorney.
Yeah.
And so I've had some people like that where they'll say, oh, there's no adoption attorney in my city. There's no adoption attorney within a couple hours of me. Well, if you self-match and then you don't have an attorney to help you, you can't move forward with the adoption. So my advice is just kind of take a second, look around you and see where you can find an experienced adoption attorney first. You may not have to hire them right away, but just kind of know where you can find one if you need it, before you start the self-matching process so that when you do get to that point where you need one, you know who to call. But yeah, the self-matching here in Nebraska works, like I said, the same way as it does anywhere in the US. Now, for the actual, I'm not sure about advertising, to be honest with you. I know that here in Nebraska, the rules are pretty strict when it comes to you advertising like your profile and things like that here in Nebraska. And so even here as an attorney myself, I cannot help adoptive parents match with expectant moms. Only a licensed agency can do that. But in other states, agencies are able to help you match, attorneys are able to help you match, and you can also advertise your profile yourself in self-matching. So states are different on what they allow when it comes to you self-matching. I know in Nebraska, you cannot just put your stuff out there in Nebraska and say, hey, looking for a baby. You can't do that here. Right. And so, so that's kind of how the laws work here in Nebraska.
Yeah, I think it's really important. What you touched on there was, kind of looking around and finding an experienced and adoption attorney around you. But I would say even go one step further, have that initial consultation meeting with them and just explain, hey, this is what I'm looking to do. This is what we're hoping, to find from a match situation. And these are the ideas of how we want to get started. How should we best work with you, right? How can you advise us? And sometimes that involves paying a small retainer, right, to get started. And maybe there's an hourly charge for conversations. Each opportunity is going to look slightly differently, but I would highly suggest it's going to be money well spent, quite honestly, to have those initial conversations. Because to your point, if an expectant mama reaches out and says that she wants to match with you, you don't want to then spend the next 3 weeks trying to find an adoption attorney, right? If she's ready to move fast, then you want to be ready to move fast with her. Now, that's not always the case, but you want to be prepared for whatever curveballs might be coming your way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So with the self-matching, that doesn't mean that, if you told all of your neighbors and your coworkers that you're adopting, and then you just kind of get a call from a friend one day saying, hey, my cousin's cousin's pregnant. That's a private self-matching opportunity, right? That's not you putting your stuff on Craigslist in Nebraska or don't do Craigslist or Facebook or, whatever else. We're talking about public advertising. That's what's not allowed in Nebraska. But you just spreading the word out to your friends and family, your community, I mean, that's allowed anywhere. There's no laws against that. It's the public advertising that's not allowed in Nebraska.
And do you know, is it allowed for people that live in Nebraska to advertise outside of Nebraska?
That I don't know. I know that in Nebraska, you can't do it. I would think that when you're doing it outside of Nebraska, you'd have to just follow that state's law.
That's it. So, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And there we do have a guide that links back to state statutes. Again, I'm not an adoption attorney. That's why Lucrece is here. But you're always welcome to, check that out over on the blog and read those yourself and then have conversations with adoption attorneys in those states if you're unfamiliar or unsure of that. So I'd like to shift our conversation into just kind of understanding how Nebraskans are allowed to support expectant mamas in the state. Are there any laws that they should be aware of, or is it really best handled on a case-by-case basis by talking with their adoption attorney to understand what they're allowed to do?
Yeah, it's better to talk to an adoption attorney because it is a case-by-case basis. One of the things that always fluctuates here is the adoption expenses. How much can you actually pay to a birth mom for pregnancy related stuff, right? That's always up for debate because the statutes don't actually tell us you can only pay for XYZ. It just says that you can pay for pregnancy related expenses. And I mean, that can mean anything pregnancy related. And so every case is taken case by case. That's why, again, having attorneys involved is important because sometimes what happens is when you have a private match going on, and I've done a few of these where mom knew the adoptive parents and they were friends. Mm-hmm. And so in that kind of friendship, if they've already been kind of helping each other out financially, things like that, once the match happens and she says, okay, I want you to have my baby because I trust you, they can still, go shopping and buy mom clothes, not thinking through, wait a minute, this is now a different situation. We used to do this before, but now this can look like we're buying the baby because I'm taking her shopping for pregnancy stuff. And she asked me money because her car broke down and she couldn't get to work. And we're helping her pay for rent. And things that they've already done just as friends before has to change once a match happens. And so, again, that's why it's important to have a professional involved because then the professionals can say, I don't know if that we can really qualify that as a pregnancy related expense. Again, as friends, I mean, we can't mess with the friendship, right? Like as friends, you can kind of do, but when it comes to the pregnancy related stuff, it really has to be something where you start getting professionals involved. So, I mean, it's just, it really is a case by case basis. And yeah.
Yeah, my personal opinion is that you don't want to operate in the gray here. You really want to operate with guidance and with, the following the law, because again, you just don't want to put anything in jeopardy because you don't want there to be any impact to baby in the end, one way or the other. Right. So. Right. For sure. Well, I'd like to shift into just speaking more about how you work with clients. And I know you also have other resources for hopeful adoptive families that aren't in Nebraska as well. Do you mind to share a little bit more about that with our audience?
Yeah. So about 2 years ago, I just had a situation that really kind of pushed me to start this program that I have now that's called the Adoption Success Accelerator. So what happened here, like I showed earlier, in Nebraska, attorneys cannot help hopeful adoptive parents match with expectant moms. Only agencies can do that. So what was happening with my law office is I'm thankfully and so honored to say this, I'm only one of 2 experienced adoption attorneys in Nebraska. So as you can imagine, I get a lot of calls from hopeful adoptive parents, especially for newborn adoption. So I was getting so many calls and there was nothing I could do because they were looking for, hey, can you help us match? Hey, can you help us adopt a baby? And I'm like, oh, I wish I could, but I can't because I'm not a licensed agency. So I would tell them is, hey, here's a couple numbers for agencies to kind of call around, call them. Once you get matched, call me, and then I can help you finalize the adoption. Yeah. And so one of those couples came to my office, I think it was back in 2019, and they were a young couple. They were so sweet, so sweet. They had been married for 1 year. And what happened was they wanted to adopt a newborn. That was their dream. And they had been together for about 7 years and they had just gotten married. And so they were like, we're starting the adoption journey. And they found my information, I sat down with them and said the same thing I said to all the other hopefully adopted parents. Here's the phone numbers for a couple of agencies. Call them and let me know how it goes. So about 2 years later, I decided to just check in on them. And I hadn't done that before for other parents, but they just made such an impression on me. So I followed up about 2 years later and I was shocked by what I found out. They told me they had been scammed by an adoption attorney out of Florida, and they had spent all this money for nothing. they had called a bunch of agencies, and they were being rejected because they had only been married for a year. So they didn't realize that there were so many rules and all that stuff with adoption. So they gave up. They gave up pursuing it, and they had spent thousands of dollars. This was 2 years later. And I was so shocked, because I was thinking, there's no way adoption is that hard. I do this all the time. Like, it doesn't, you spend how much? I was just so shocked trying to take in all the information. So because of Tom and Molly, which is the couple, I decided, gosh, I want to go figure out what happened? Like, what is it that they were learning online? Like, how did they get themselves in this situation? So I started doing some research on my own, and I was shocked to find out how much misinformation was out there, like YouTube, Facebook, Google, and just there was so many pieces of information, but there wasn't anything that was streamlined for people, like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and how to actually mold the adoption process to your own circumstances and situation in life, so you can actually go through it without wasting a ton of time, and especially without wasting money. It's going to cost you money either way, but I mean, you don't have to waste money making mistakes.
That's right.
And so that's actually how I came up with the adoption program. Is I wanted to find a way to help adoptive families, so that people like Tom and Molly, they're just so sweet, who were just like, we just want to grow a family that could actually have a blueprint to follow and not have to go through what Tom and Molly did, And so anyway, it's called the Adoption Success Accelerator, and it's for any adoptive parent all across the United States. You don't have to live in Nebraska to go through it. And so what it does is helps you from A to Z, and just teaches you how to go through the adoption process successfully and do it without unnecessarily wasting money and time as well. And so in the program, I mentor the families and just kind of teach them how to go through the adoption. I've had so many successes. It's been amazing to see families bring in their babies and just cutting off their losses. Like, some of them were working with agencies before, had spent thousands of dollars, and they came through the program, and within a few months they were matched and they brought baby home. So it's been really incredible working with adoptive families in that way. So that's the other service that I provide for families right now.
That is amazing. And we'll make sure to link to it in all the show notes. Yeah. So wherever you're listening or watching this, you can just simply scroll down and you'll find the link to that program so that you can get more information about working with Lucerce. And then how can families that are actually in Nebraska that need an adoption attorney, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you as well? Would you like for us to include a link in the show notes to that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I am on social media, and you can just type in my name, even Lucerce Bundy, on Google, and you should find my law office. It's Bundy Law, so it's pretty easy. But I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and also on YouTube. YouTube is probably the easiest way to find me. I've got tons of videos there, just free information for folks who want to learn more about adoption and how to go through the process. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I highly, highly recommend your YouTube channel all the time. One, it's a great resource. It's a resource that I consult quite often. But two, whenever we very first met for the first time, I told you that I was totally fangirling because I was like, wow, I actually get to meet you. This is so cool. You were my inspiration for getting brave enough to start my channel. I was like, okay, I can do this. I watched your videos ad nauseum to prepare myself to get the courage to do it. So
yeah, and I'm so glad you did, because you're helping so many families as well. Just getting that information out there that families need, to make this process easier for folks. Because really the goal here is, when you cut through all the fluff and the cost of adoption, all these kinds of things, what we're doing is helping families become families.
That's right.
Like when you think about your family right now, as you're watching this YouTube video or even listening to the podcast, this is about building families. And what Amanda and I, like, our passion is to help you do that in the easiest way possible and show you the proper steps to take so that it doesn't have to be this grueling process where you lose hope. You can actually do this. It is possible to do it. And even within a year, if you just have the proper resources and you have the people who just love doing this, who are behind you and helping coach you. So Amanda, I also love what you're doing. I mean, it's incredible what you're doing. And you've even helped students of mine with self-matching, which has been incredible. So love what you're doing as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, we are really appreciative for all that you do for the community. And again, I highly recommend that you check out Lucrece's programs, and I'll have all of the links in the show notes so that you can easily find them, or head on over to Google and just type in Bundy Law so that you can find her. But thank you again, Lucrece, for being willing to join us today and give us part of your day. We really appreciate you.
Thanks, Amanda.
I trust that this conversation with Lucrece was incredibly valuable. Again, I can't say enough about what an amazing person she is and resource for our community. I really do suggest that you check out her YouTube channel and the Adoption Accelerator Success Program so that you can get support throughout the entire adoption journey. Remember, you are worthy of support, and there are amazing resources in this community that have your back every step of the way. We'll see you soon, friend.